6 key points from a landmark report on Brexit that Theresa May will find hard reading. A cross-party group of MPs have sounded the alarm bell about the danger of the UK crashing out of the EU without a new deal in place. The Brexit Committee takes Theresa May's government to task for the claimed no deal for Britain is better than a bad deal. It warns this is not backed up with evidence. They say it is imperative the government assesses what could happen to the economy and sets out what action it could take if no deal is agreed. The MPs also warn Conservative ministers they must formally respond to the Welsh Government's Brexit proposals as a matter of urgency. The report has intensified concerns that a deal may not be agreed during the 24-month negotiating process. A Welsh Government spokeswoman warned this would have an immediate impact on poverty in Wales and that it cannot agree to any other position than continuing full and unfettered access to the single market. Here are the key points from the landmark Brexit Committee report. 1. Parliament must have a vote before leaving without a deal, the report states. We believe that Parliament must have a vote in the event that there is no deal. Leaving the EU without a future trade deal and in doing so defaulting to World Trade Organization WTO rules is no less an important decision for the UK's economic future than the terms of any future free trade agreement between the UK and the EU. It is therefore essential that such a step is not taken without Parliament having a vote on the matter. 2. The better way must be found of taking on board Welsh priorities. The committee heard strong complaints about the official consultation process with the devolved administrations. The MPs called for a more effective process for engaging the devolved administrations in developing the UK's negotiating position. They urged the UK government to respond formally to the Welsh, Scottish and Northern Ireland legislatures regarding each of their options papers, stating, it must do so as a matter of urgency given that negotiations to leave the EU will start imminently. 3. The government must understand how Wales is different from other parts of the UK, the MPs state. If the future deal is to be acceptable to the whole of the UK, then these differences will need to be discussed, negotiated and common ground agreed upon. Differing priorities reflect, in part, differences in the economies and demography of different parts of the UK. The government must ensure that it understands these differences and takes them into account when it begins its negotiations with the EU. 4. It must share information with the Welsh government, they warn. If the government's asserted wish to fully engage the devolved administrations is to be credible, it must share more information and discuss options before decisions are reached. 5. The Assembly's consent may well be required for Brexit legislation. The legislation required to implement the UK's exit from the EU will affect the competences of the devolved administrations and it is expected that it will require their legislative consent. The devolved administrations will require adequate time to conduct the appropriate scrutiny and consultation required before consent can be given. It is likely that the devolved administrations will need to pass their own additional legislation, in turn requiring time for proper consideration in the devolved legislatures. The government will need to take account of the time scales of the devolved legislatures in its planning. They quote Prof. Roger Scully of Cardiff University's Wales Governance Centre's warnings about the challenge facing the Assembly of dealing with the consequences of Brexit. He stated, I think the Assembly is being put in essentially an impossible position, being given a level of responsibility that it does not have remotely the capacity to properly fulfill. 6. Securing a free trade agreement FTA must be a priority. The government should seek a UK-EU FTA which covers both goods and services and retains the mutual recognition of professional qualifications and product standards. Negotiating a good deal on trade in services must be a priority given that it accounts for 42% of the UK's exports to the EU. They also criticize the government for being vague about what arrangement will replace the customs union and say it must provide more clarity. It must also be a priority to find out whether the UK can continue to use the 50-plus free trade agreements other countries have struck with the EU. Plaid Cymru wanted the report to go further. Jonathan Edwards, the party's member on the Brexit Committee, wanted the committee to say that the final deal required the endorsement of the National Assembly of Wales, Scottish Parliament and Northern Ireland Assembly. However, his amendment was defeated by 11 votes to 4. He said, I am dismayed that the Labour Party were happy to join with the Tories to actively mute the interests of our country. Carwyn Jones has presided over the undermining of Welsh democracy by his own party. He says he wants Wales to be able to defend itself and to further its interests after Brexit but then completely fails to get the agreement of even his MPs. let alone his leader. A Welsh Labour source described Mr. Edwards' comments as a strange rant, adding, "No doubt his colleagues in the Assembly, who back our position on Brexit and who have worked with us constructively to deliver budgets and legislation, will feel embarrassed by his bizarre intervention." There was deep controversy on the committee. 5 Conservatives, including ex-ministers John Whittingdale and Dominic Raab, and Democratic Unionist Sammy Wilson voted against the report. Here is the Welsh Government position. There is strong consensus among mainstream forecasters that replacing single market participation with World Trade Organization (WTO) rules could result in an 8 to 10% reduction in the UK economy and would devastate trade in certain key sectors including food, manufacturing and the automotive sector. This would have both an immediate and long-term impact on living standards and poverty in Wales. The case for continuing full and unfettered access to the single market is overwhelming and we can agree to no other position. This is what Brexit Secretary David Davis had to say. "We have been absolutely clear that we are seeking a deep and special partnership with the EU, taking in trade and the many other areas where we have shared aims and values, such as security. We are confident that such an outcome is in the interests of both sides. However, the responsible government should prepare for all potential outcomes, including the unlikely scenario in which no mutually satisfactory agreement can be reached, and that is exactly what we are doing. We have also been analyzing the impact of different scenarios on different sectors of the economy. We are clear that no deal is not what we want or expect, but that it would be better than a deal which sought to punish the UK. There will be great opportunities for the UK as it takes up its new place in the world. As the Prime Minister has said, the government is committed to creating a global Britain that will be stronger, fairer, more united and outward-looking than ever before."